All right, welcome back. It is Palm Sunday when we are recording, which means it is 1 week until Easter.
One week from the
Celebrate.
big day.
Yeah, we always look forward to this day. It's such a great day to celebrate. But with that, with it being a holiday, of course, you get all of these uh, claims. We did this back at Christmas too. Is Christmas pagan? Well, today, of course, you've probably already seen them. People's already saying Easter is a pagan holiday. So that's what we're gonna look at today. Is it pagan?
Yeah. Is Easter a pagan holiday? Because anytime you get on the internet, you know whatever's on there's true. So you got
Oh
to
yeah,
go with it.
no,
So
no doubt.
so we're going to look at these claims and look at this about Easter because, like we've said multiple times on here, Easter is by far our favorite holiday. It's we love to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, and so we're going to get to talk about that today, Justin, and we're going to get to talk about whether or not this is pagan, whether or not it's got pagan roots. You know, fortunately, neither one of our wives are going to have to take down an Easter tree if we find out this is pagan and we if we
Don't go
settle on
so
that.
far.
Yeah.
Don't go so far. Mine has a tree, but
Oh yeah, well mine does too. You know, it stays up year round, but
yeah.
you know it's okay. It's okay.
As of right now, though, it doesn't have any Easter decorations in it. I'm not gonna
Well,
say
I
that.
cannot say that. Mine has eggs. So we need to look at this. You know, it's something we're gonna have to talk about.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad you said that about the eggs because that is a part of this. What's the deal with
Yeah,
the eggs and the rabbit and all of this?
the rabbits. That's never made sense to me, you know, anyway. You know, you got eggs and rabbits, like not eggs and chickens. Nah,
Yeah,
what's the deal, man? What's the deal?
yeah. I don't understand. I don't understand that part either. But we are going to talk about it, and I'm sure throughout the week people will say things about it because we definitely sparked some conversation this past week with our episode, which was good. Even
You know,
though
the one thing, Justin, the one comment on there that I did look at and go, okay, that's got some validity. We didn't discuss this. There was someone said something about he could have been a legend, that Jesus could have been a legend.
mhm,
And so we haven't even discussed this. I even told you I was going to bring it up, but I thought, okay, that I understand your concern there. The thing is, when you look into that, Jesus actually could not have been a legend.
right,
I mean, what was told about him, what was written about him, happened way too soon after his death and resurrection for it to have been a legend. It was written down, and people were alive and would have disputed that and went, no, 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 that's not accurate. Nobody did that.
yeah,
You know, we there's no record of that. So I mean that claim, and I understand why it's a good question. I have no problem with them bringing that out, and we didn't address it. So I'm glad they did bring it out, so we can address it. But like the writings about Jesus and who he was and his resurrection and his death and burial, the writings about that occurred so close to it happening that there's no way that he was a legend. That this just derived over time.
right,
And so, I'm glad they brought it out. I'm glad we get to talk about it real quick, and just debunk that, as Carl would say, and send it on its way.
yeah.
So that's that.
But with this episode, we like I said, we are talking about Easter and is it a pagan holiday or not, and all this different stuff. So just to start it off, let's just say what Easter is really about. And we've mentioned this several times on this show, and some of the things we're about to go through. We've talked about plenty of times on this show.
Yep.
But Easter is about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and it is historically tied to Passover.
Yep.
Um, so, with that being said, it is placed in Jewish historical context, not pagan mythology. You can look at history and see that.
And that's what I think. It should end this debate before it even begins, because when you look at back at what you're celebrating, and what it's about, it is steeped in Jewish historical context. When you look at what the early church was celebrating, when you look at the things that were going on, it has nothing to do with pagan mythology, nothing
Right.
to do.
Right.
But You put anything on the internet for longer than 10 minutes, and all of a sudden it becomes pagan, and somebody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so but it's one of those things. This is Easter in itself. It's rooted and it's steeped from Jewish historical context, not from pagan mythology.
Right. Yeah. This wasn't some later invention.
Mm-mm.
This started immediately. Um,
Right.
I mean, I don't even know. I don't even really know how this argument came about because of its roots and everything like that. But like you said,
Well,
there,
well, like you were saying, the early Christians were Jewish.
yeah,
They knew where this was from. So like it's like we're now 2,000 years removed from it, and all of a sudden we're having a debate over something that they would have looked at and went, "Have you lost your mind?" If this would have came back up then, they'd have been like, "Are you all crazy? Why are you debating this?"
yeah,
Um, so it's not like they borrowed something from paganism here. Uh, Easter really entered a pagan world,
I did.
just like Jesus did,
Yeah,
and he confronted that world, and that's what Easter has done. It's confronted the world, and so from that, and it's kind of what we're looking at.
yeah, and with the resurrection, the question here is with this whole holiday is not just is it pagan, but did the resurrection actually happen? And again, this is something that we've spent a lot of time looking at on this show. We're going to hit the high points today, but you can go back and watch that full episode and see some more details on it. But the first thing that you even look at is the empty tomb. It was
Yeah,
recorded in Scripture, a public known location, and if the body is there, Christianity ends immediately. It's over.
yeah, and this is something we have said over and over. And but you can't talk about the resurrection without going through this because inevitably somebody online is going to go, "Wait a minute, you can't even prove it's true." And I know we had somebody last week said it's the most documented historical thing available, and they're like, "Oh, show me some." Um, how did they word it? Some peer-reviewed studies
Yeah,
on on the resurrection. Well, here's one for you. Go to the tomb. It's empty.
yeah,
Take your peer with you. See if they review it.
yeah,
I mean, it's simple. It ends there. The tomb is empty, and like you said, it's a known location. If the body's there, Christianity ends. It's over. It stopped for us.
yeah,
But the fact is, it didn't. All the Jews had to do was produce a body. All the Romans had to do was produce a body. Nobody could do it.
yeah,
And even the critics of Christianity don't deny the empty tomb.
yeah,
They began trying to explain it away.
yeah.
They began trying to come up with theory things about how it happened,
Hmm.
but they couldn't.
Um, Not only that, but you also had the eyewitness testimony. 1
Yep.
Corinthians 15 lists eyewitnesses, which included 500 plus people, and it was all this stuff was
Yeah.
written early, within a couple of decades. So this is like your go verify it kind of moment here. If you want to talk to somebody, well, there's 500 people that you could go and talk to, and um, they would have an answer for you.
Yeah. You were lagging there a little bit on my end. I didn't catch everything you said there, but you're exactly right. I mean, there were so many people that witnessed this, 500 plus. And so all of it written down again within a couple of decades, just like we said. So there's no way it could be a legend. There's no way nobody can make this up and make up some claim about it and it not be true because people would have seen it, people would have heard about it, people would have talked about it. And if you say something wrong, just like today, you putting something wrong out there, people are going to question you about it and they're going to call you on it.
Yeah, and people like to say, well, they were just having a hallucination or whatever, but 500 people,
500 people? Yeah.
they don't share that same hallucination. That's not a good
All of a
argument.
sudden, we all hallucinated the same thing
Yeah,
and we saw Jesus. What?
yeah. Another thing that we've, like I said, we've talked about it before, but the transformed disciples, these guys went from fearful, guys to guys that were bold, who were willing to suffer and die. You think about Peter, for example. Peter was one that denied Jesus 3 times, but yet after that, he was willing to do whatever. It didn't matter.
Denied he even knew him.
Yeah,
To a little girl.
yeah,
To a little girl. Like he let a little girl punk him out.
yeah,
And then and he changed from that to being bold, to going, you can say or do whatever you want to with me.
yeah,
I can't deny what I've seen. I can't deny the truth. I can't deny what happened.
yeah,
You don't do that, Justin, on a lie.
yeah,
You certainly don't do it on something you know's a lie.
yeah,
Um, that's just people don't do that. You nobody's going to commit to something that they don't believe in.
yeah,
And we've got so many of the disciples, all of the disciples, just totally changed up. I mean, they became fearless.
yeah. They did. Not only that, but you also had skeptics who turned into believers. So you think about
Oh yeah.
Paul. Paul was a persecutor of the church, but later on, he became a missionary. James,
Yep.
another guy, brother of Jesus,
Yeah. Brother of Jesus.
very
Grew
skeptical.
up with him, skeptical when he first came out with his ministry. But when your brother rises from the grave, after he predicts that it's going to happen, you kind of go with what he says. And you're like, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Um, Something drastic had to happen to change their minds. It wasn't just, um, something small. It was something drastic changed their mind. Um, on top of that, though, you had the explosion of the early church.
But
It.
before we hit the explosion of the early church, let's talk about that real quick. Something drastic having to change their mind. And it wasn't like it changed their mind and they were gaining power or they're gaining reputation or they were getting money. Something changed their mind, and what they got for it was persecuted.
Yeah, and
What
they
they
were
got
willing.
for it was ridicule. What they got for it was being harassed. What they got was their lives taken for what they. So it wasn't like something happened and they're like, oh, we see an end here to where we can make some money and we can gain some political power and we can do all this stuff. Something happened that made them say, okay, no, we were wrong. This is right. And it cost them everything.
Yeah,
That's huge. That is huge.
yeah. But going back to the explosion of the early church, it begins in Jerusalem, and it even
Just
grows.
happens to be where it happened.
Yeah,
Just happened to be where the crucifixion took place.
right.
And that's where the church begins.
Yeah. And even through the persecution, it grows because people
Yep.
knew it
So
was true.
Pilate, Nero, Herod, all of them persecuting the church. And instead of that squashing it, which is what they wanted to do, it grew.
Yeah.
It just continued to grow.
Yeah. You don't successfully fake a resurrection in the same city where it supposedly happened. That's just
No way, man.
not going to work.
Somebody's calling you out.
Yeah.
Somebody's calling you out if that happens.
Yeah. So let's just kind of look at the pagan myth comparison here. A myth is something that might have some symbolism. It's kind of vague at the same time.
Yeah.
The resurrection, though, is historical. It's very specific, grounded in the Roman Empire. You know, again, there's more than just Christian um, authors who said something about the resurrection. It wasn't
Oh,
just a
yeah.
Christian claim.
There were people who were completely against Christ who confirmed that Jesus Christ was crucified
Yeah,
and that the body's gone.
yeah,
And so this is not just one set of, you're not just taking the four gospels. I mean, those four accounts and you can take them and you can read them and it's all accurate. But it is also all these other documents that we have that, and we've gone through all this before. Again, we don't have time to go back through it all again, but there's all kinds of different outside sources that confirm the resurrection.
right,
And so it's a historical fact. It's a historical thing that happened.
yeah,
And so there's places, there's names, there's consequences, there's things that myths don't have that the resurrection of Jesus Christ has because it's accurate, it's true. It's not something that's made up. It's not something that's fantasized. It's not something that's glamorized, but it's something that's steeped in historical context.
right. With that being said, you don't have to twist history to try to explain Easter. You have to ignore it to deny it.
Yeah.
Again, the evidence is there. I mean, it's harder to say that it didn't happen than it is to
Yeah.
go the other way. But let's just take a minute then and say, where does Easter come from? And just kind of
Okay.
look at this claim here.
Where do you want to start first? Ishtar?
Yeah, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So a lot of people say Easter equals Ishtar.
Hmm.
Ishtar is the fertility goddess. There's eggs. There's reproduction. So that has to be where it came from. Therefore, Easter is pagan. Now, what's actually going on here, Justin, is that claim comes mostly from modern internet memes,
Right.
not historical scholarship.
Yeah.
Um, Ishtar was from ancient Mesopotamia.
Hmm.
The word Easter is Old English. It's got German roots. They're not. I think ancient Mesopotamia, Akkadian, I think was the language, but they're not linguistically connected in any credible way. Um, so I guess you would say that argument works because it sounds convincing, not because it actually is convincing when you start diving into it.
Yeah.
Um, so it sounds a lot better than what the truth actually is.
Yeah.
And so when you start digging into those and you start doing a word search and you start really looking at the roots and the history and everything that comes there, you recognize really quick, okay, these aren't connected. There's no credible source connecting this.
Yeah.
And so that's not where that comes from. The real source um, is probably more likely tied to Eostre, um, which we get this from Bede.
Hmm.
He's 8th century author, and then he wrote that the Anglo Saxons had a spring festival, and it was named after the goddess Eostre. And so when Christianity began to spread, that name stuck for the time of season that they were recognizing, but not necessarily because they were celebrating Easter. Um, and the other thing is, Bede is the only primary source that we have for Easter, the only one.
Yeah.
Some scholars debate whether that was even worshipped, that was something that was even worshipped. You know, so you're building a whole argument off of one historical reference.
Yeah.
So that should make us cautious. That should make us go, Is that accurate?"
Yeah.
Um, and again, we've talked about this when we're talking about we're talking about examining documents, historical documents, and I can't remember what podcast that was on. It was early on. We talked about this. There's a whole science that goes into this, guys, and you can't just take something at face value in a historical document. And so we've got one source saying this. If you only have one source for scripture, then nobody would believe it.
Yeah.
The reality is, it's the best historical document we have based on all the tests, and people still doubt its credibility
Right.
because they refuse to look at evidence and truth. And I mean, when you go back and you look at the historical documentation and the credibility of the historical documentation of Scripture, then there's no way you can argue with it if you understand anything about historical documents,
Right.
like anything at all. And so people say, no, it's been changed. It's been this. No, it's not. No, it's not. Actually, the more they decipher, and they're still doing this because the Dead Sea Scrolls we've just found those, I think, in like, do you remember what year that we even found? I don't even remember. It was in the 1900s. It
I
was
think like
not too long
47,
ago.
47.
Yeah. But they're still, because of how many they are and having to go through all that, they're still making discoveries based on those. Okay. That's how new that is, even though it was been, getting close to 100 years ago we found them. Um, but they're still so new that we're still making documented things about them because we're new discoveries about it. And every one of them still line up with everything that we've seen. And so, like, it blows my mind when people make that argument about scripture and they have no clue what they're talking about at all with it. Um, and so when we use just Bede, we got to recognize we're only using one historical reference there.
Right.
Um, and the word, while most of the world doesn't even say Easter, it's it's the Greek word is Pascha. The Latin word is Pascha. The Spanish word is Pascua. The French word is Paquis. All talking about this same time.
Yeah.
You know where all those words originate from? What word?
Yeah. It's Passover.
Yeah, every one of those.
Yeah.
But when it was translated here in what we're saying, that's all of a sudden they're going, oh no, that makes it that makes it pagan. Well, only the English and German languages use Easter.
Right.
The global church connects this time to the Passover.
Yeah.
So it's one of those cases where it's a translation error on the English part,
Right.
really.
Right. And the name Easter may have some cultural history. The event, though, is rooted in Jewish and historical reality, and the two
Yeah,
are not the same thing.
yeah,
So,
you're right.
so even though you got all that going on, just because the words sound alike doesn't mean that they're connected um, in that.
In any way.
Yeah, yeah. So let's take another step. Like we said, we're going to talk about the eggs and the rabbit and the symbols and all of that. So every year you get these kids and you put these eggs out and they have a good time while they're out there doing it. They kill each other trying to get eggs, but eggs represent new life, and so that is easy symbolic connection to the resurrection. Um, that's just a good a good way to kind of illustrate that.
Yeah, and so it's something simple. It represents with an egg. I mean, we look at it and we represent it with protein, but the reality, the reality is eggs are representative of new life, and so that is a very, very, very simple connection to the resurrection.
Yeah,
Bunnies, okay, that's a later cultural addition, man. It is associated with spring. It is associated with the new life, the fertility of what's going on in the world, and so it is something that has been added on.
yeah,
Um, I'm not gonna lie, I love a chocolate bunny. So I don't know what the problem is there. You know, I mean, but this goes back. It's like the Christmas tree versus the birth of Christ.
right.
The bunny just kind of showed up and stuck around.
Yeah, just
It's
an
just-
add-on. It's not a foundation of anything.
no.
Yeah. So, did then Christianity adopt pagan practices? That's kind of where we have to go from there.
Okay, so here I think you got to really talk, Justin, about the real historical context. Christianity, of course, did not grow in a vacuum. Christianity started in Jerusalem. It started with the resurrection, and it began to make its way throughout the Roman Empire.
Right.
And so it started touching culture. And so you're talking about a world that is full of pagan temples, and a world that was full of seasonal festivals, and a world that was full of local traditions. And so as Christianity touched those, and as Christianity came into those, as it encountered pagan culture, the questions came, what do we do with this? How do we deal with this?
Yeah, and people like to pull Constantine into this, and
Yep.
he Constantine was a fascinating person to kind of do a deep dive on. You had this thing with him reportedly seeing a cross in the sky, and so
Hmm.
along with that had the words "In this sign, conquer." And so he kind of took that and ran with it, but he also had a dream that same night that Christ appeared to him in a dream and told him to use that cross symbol in battle. And so what Constantine did is he orders his soldiers to mark their shields with this symbol, and he
Hmm.
went into battle under that sign, and he won. He won that battle. And so this victory that he had, it changed everything. He gave credit to the Christian God. He believed that the Christian God gave him victory, and what that did is it validated Christianity's power. And so in AD 313, he issued this decree, really, and what it did is it legalized Christianity, and it ended this persecution that had been going on for so long, and allowed Christians to worship freely. And he went on to support the church. He funded church buildings. He supported Christian leaders. He would eventually call the famous Council of Nicaea, and gave Christianity a lot of influence. And so what you get here is, this guy supported Christianity. He stopped this persecution. He did all of this stuff, but at the same time, he still had a lot of pagan stuff going on. He allowed these
Well,
pagan titles to still be attached to him, and all kinds of stuff like that.
yeah, and he didn't invent any of the core doctrines of Christianity.
Right.
He was a guy who took it and did some things, and I won't even say he did them right. Some of the things he did was just not. I mean, you can't force relationship
Well, I mean,
again. And
you got to think with
but
him, he didn't get this and then just become a fully formed theologian. He's just like
right.
a typical convert. You start off and then you grow as you grow. And so he didn't even get baptized till right before he died. And a lot of people thought, well, that's kind of weird. Why didn't he want to do that?
So wait a minute. You're saying he became a Christian and he wasn't perfect right off the bat?
That's yeah, that's
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, he still made some mistakes,
yeah,
even though he was. And I think the world misses that a lot, man. Is that when you become a Christian, you don't just automatically become perfect. That's not the way that works, man. You grow in Christ, and what Christianity is recognizing that there's nothing you can do.
right,
You're steeped in sin, and there's nothing you can do. So you have to depend on Jesus Christ, and you place your faith and trust in Him. And so, and that's as that message went out, and as it touched the culture, there were some things that the Christians just outright refused, and that was idol worship, sacrificing to God, emperor worship, because all of those were three things that were just major things that were happening in pagan communities before Constantine time, when all these things were just starting, and Christians were persecuted because they wouldn't compromise those things. They
yeah,
said, we're not going to be involved in idol worship. We're not going to be involved with sacrifices to your gods. We're not going to call your emperor a god. We're not going to worship them. But there were some other things that they really weren't interested and didn't care about: dates, seasons, language,
yeah,
symbolism. And so you had things steep into Christianity in cultures that weren't necessarily Christian, but they weren't necessarily pagan. You had Christmas trees, you had Easter eggs, all these things started to come into play. And so, really, what the Christians did is they changed the meaning,
yeah,
even though the form didn't change.
right,
They adopted some of these things. They weren't theirs. They didn't bring them, but they adopted them to connect the culture to the relevance of Christianity.
right,
And so the worship, though, always centered around the resurrection. And there was communion and there was baptism. And that defines Christianity. Those are not borrowed elements.
right,
You know, there's nothing borrowed about the resurrection. There's nothing borrowed about communion. There's nothing borrowed about baptism. Those are three essential things that define Christianity that they didn't bring in. And so, even though the belief system, does things, language gets adapted, cultural forms get used, meanings get reshaped. We're speaking English right now, and we're talking about the gospel, but that doesn't make the gospel English.
right. Whoa, hold on now. Don't get too carried away. You're gonna say something.
That doesn't mean its origin is English just because we're talking about it.
Yeah, don't get too carried away there.
So,
You get a crowd of people really upset here in a minute.
well, I like we've had this conversation before, and it's one of those things. There's a big misunderstanding there.
Yeah,
But one of the things is people often. think just because things look similar, then something one must have copied the other.
Yeah.
But just because they're similar don't mean the origin's the same.
Right.
There are spring life themes everywhere.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean Christianity borrowed. It means human recognized those same patterns and those same things, and they pulled things in and here and there. But Christianity did not come from paganism.
Yeah.
It moved into pagan cultures and it transformed pagan cultures. And there were some things that stuck around that weren't brought in by Christianity, but they didn't necessarily die out.
Yeah.
But Christianity didn't borrow its message. The world borrowed Christianity's calendar.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. The resurrection wasn't shaped by culture. Culture was reshaped by the resurrection. It's the one event that changed the entire world. It changed the whole scope of the planet.
Yeah. It did. With all that being said, obviously, there, like we said, there might be some things that might be similar, to pagan practices and things like that. Should Christians celebrate Easter? And I think the answer to that is most definitely yes, but there's a but, with the right focus. We've got to keep the focus on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's not about the eggs or the rabbit or the Easter baskets or anything like
Or the chocolate bunnies
that. Yeah,
or anything.
yeah,
As good as they are, that's not what it's about. And
yeah,
I think you're exactly right. We should be celebrating Easter.
yeah,
And listen, if you want to call it Resurrection Sunday, I don't have a problem with that. That's what it's about. But don't be condemning somebody just because they're saying it's Easter, because when you look at the whole scope of things, there's no validity there.
yeah.
So we should celebrate 100%. Listen, I don't see how you're a Christian and you're not celebrating at this point in time.
Right,
This is huge, guys. This is
right.
huge. The resurrection of Jesus is huge.
Yeah, me and Sam, she gets cracked up at me, and we actually made a video about this earlier because, and we don't have to talk about it on the show. I just thought it was funny to kind of bring up. She was talking about, um, we was out eating, and she was saying that she was wanting to match or something. You know how these women do on Easter. They want to match and all that. And I'm like, why do we even really spend so much time and money dressing up on Easter and taking pictures and all this? Like, yeah, I love Easter. Easter's my favorite. But he's the resurrected Savior 365 days a year.
52 weeks, every one of them, every day, he
Yeah.
is the Savior.
Yeah, so I'm like,
Um,
I don't think he cares if you wear your best suit, or your suspenders and your bright colors and all that and take pictures. That's not what it's about.
Listen, that's one of those things that, again, is tradition.
Yeah,
It's one of those things that has came in, and our wives love it.
yeah,
And you've got to take Easter photos, and you got to have got to have a new Easter dress. I don't have a new Easter dress. Never owned a new Easter dress. Never gonna own a new Easter dress.
yeah.
Like, I'm not even buying a new Easter shirt. Just
No,
that I'm pulling something out of the closet.
that's how I feel.
But it's one of those traditions that is snuck in. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
Um, but it's one of those things that culture has shaped, and it
yeah,
started. A lot of that started from the whole reason, and people get tore up about what you wear to church and how you're dressed, and all this, because tradition was that you dress up and you put on your best because you're going to worship the best.
yeah,
And so you want to look your best.
yeah.
But it's tradition.
It is. It
It's
is.
tradition.
It is tradition. And
Like, I get so cracked up sometimes when people are like, well, Jesus would want. Jesus didn't wear a tie. He did not preach the Sermon on the Mount wearing a tie.
no,
And so people get tore up if a pastor's not wearing a tie. And I'm going, Jesus didn't wear a tie ever, ever. So just like they choked Brit, they would have choked him. He don't want to wear that either.
yeah,
Um, but it's one of those things that's become tradition.
yeah,
He didn't dress like our culture. And I'm not telling you to go out and put on a robe, but that was their cultural dress.
yeah. The reason that I really brought that up is that you get all of these traditions at Easter that are fine. There's nothing wrong with them, whatever. But don't let that be the focus of Easter Sunday.
100%.
It should be
Yeah, if
all about Jesus and the resurrection. Like the
yeah,
rest of that stuff.
if it starts coming more about what the gift you're getting, or the candy, or an Easter bunny, or an egg hunt, if that starts taking the place of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, something is wrong.
Yeah,
Something's off.
yeah, yeah. Like we've been saying this whole episode, Easter it's not about tradition. It's about truth. It's about the
100%.
resurrection. And again, if that resurrection didn't happen, then what we're doing is pointless. Church is pointless. All of that is pointless. But it did happen, and we know that it happened 100%, no doubts whatsoever. We know that it happened, and that's what we should be celebrating. No pagan myth in history has ever produced an empty tomb. None of them.
None.
And no bunny has ever rolled away a stone.
Never. Nobody ever. Chocolate or otherwise.
Right. So, you got anything extra you want to add on this before we close it
Man,
out?
I would just say as you enter this week, this holy week, today is the day that Jesus entered Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and the crowd were waving and palm branches, and it was amazing because they were shouting Hosanna, and prophecies were fulfilled. And maybe next week we talk about the prophecies, Justin. Maybe we just look at the prophecies around the resurrection, the crucifixion, and that sort of stuff. We ain't even talked about it, but I just think it'd be a great topic, a
Yeah,
great thing to look at. And um, but he had people proclaim him as king, but it wasn't the king that they expected. And in 1 week, things shifted. Within 1 week, they had him crucified. This was the only time, some 2,000 years ago today, that Jesus kind of leaned into a public celebration, but it
yeah,
set everything else in motion. And so tomorrow will be Monday, and they have the temple cleansing on that day, where Jesus goes in and he drives the money changers out. And he says, "My house is supposed to be a house of prayer, and y'all desecrated it. You've made it all this other stuff." And he directly confronts the corrupt religious system. Um, Tuesday, he's teaching, and there's more confrontation, and there's all these warnings and parables, and the Olivet Discourse, and you can look that up. But Jesus is teaching on end times there, and he's exposing hypocrisy. Wednesday, you get into the preparation day, and there's not a whole lot recorded in history. You ever looked at that? I'm certain
yeah,
you've looked at that, but there's not a whole lot recorded in history on what happened on Wednesday. But it's possible that that's the day that Judas went out and began to betray Jesus, um, and start setting things in motion. And then Thursday, you had the Last Supper. Of course, that evening is when Jesus was arrested. Friday, you got him before Pontius Pilate, and he was crucified and placed in the ground before the day was over.
yeah,
And then Saturday, there was silence.
yeah,
And then on Sunday, the resurrection.
yeah,
Definitely something we need to discuss next week, again, because it'll be on Easter, and that'll be fun.
yeah.
And maybe we even talk about 3 days. 3 days. It's Friday to Sunday. That's not 3 days.
Right. That is a good topic.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
So maybe we look at that, and we look at we look at the prophecies around the resurrection and the crucifixion.
yeah. So we do hope that as you go throughout this week that, Britt just took you through every day of what we call Holy Week. And so we hope that each day you'll reflect upon that and think about the events that took place of ultimately Jesus going and paying the price for your sin and my sin, even though he didn't have to do that. He chose to do that because he loves us. And so we hope that you'll reflect upon that all week, and that Sunday, like Brett said, we'll hopefully be back for another episode, but it'll be after church time. So we hope that you will make it a priority on Sunday to be at church somewhere, and that you will partake in the celebration of Jesus defeating death, sin, and hell. And if you've never given your life to him before, that seeing the scriptures and reading that will be something that will just really move your heart, and that you'll give your life to Christ through that. But
Yep.
if nothing else, we will see you guys next week. Again, hope you have a good week. I've actually forgot to mention it in the past couple of episodes, but don't forget about our partnership with the 1% Fitness. We do have a 20% off code that you can use. That is iron, the and sign, or if you want to be fancy, say, what's that thing called again?
Ampersand,
Yeah.
ampersand.
Iron, that thing, fire. And that'll get you 20.
Justin, I will tell you, it is the smoothest creatine that I've ever taken
That's
by
awesome.
far,
And
by far.
I did see right now. I think it's still going on anyway. It's buy one get one on pre-workout. So
Yep.
that would be a good time to use that 20% code. Get 2 tubs of pre-workout, and something you can enjoy for a while. But
Yep. I know you're a big pre-workout guy.
I do.
You got to be,
I
because
like
you're
it.
going so early in the morning. You've
Yeah,
got to be a big
yeah.
pre-workout guy.
Gets me rolling in the morning. It's the
Just
pre-workout.
give me my coffee, bro. Just give me my coffee.
But anyway, we will see you guys next week. Have a good week.